Your house is paid off. That is the single most dangerous thing about it. Not because there is anything wrong with the house, because of what it looks like from the outside. Right now, anybody with an internet connection can pull up your address, see that there is no lender sitting on your title, and work out in roughly 30 seconds that there is nothing standing between them and everything you spent 40 years paying for. That search is free. It requires no special access and no permission. And a paid-off house belonging to somebody over 60 is the specific thing being searched for. So the mortgage you were so relieved to finish was, among other things, a guard. A bank with money in your property watches that property. When the last payment cleared, the guard went home. There are 5 pieces of paper that replace it. Most of them are free. Most take under an hour. But here is the thing I want you to hold, because it is the reason most people who think they are protected are not. Those 5 documents do not all defend against the same thing. There are 3 completely separate groups who can come at your home, and they arrive through 3 completely separate doors. Scammers, who forge paperwork and take the property outright. Creditors, who attach a judgment from a lawsuit or a medical bill. And the government, meaning the tax authority and your own county, which can place a lien or seize the house entirely. 5 documents, 3 doors, and they do not overlap the way people assume, which produces the single most common mistake in this entire subject. The one document almost everybody has heard of defends one door and does absolutely nothing for the other 2. People file it, feel protected, and stop. Meanwhile, the free one that takes 5 minutes, the one that would have prevented the worst story in this video, is the one nobody has heard of at all. The protection runs backward to the fame. I will show you exactly where. My name is Kevin. I read the rules so you do not have to sit with them. And every week, I bring one of these here in plain English with the specific move attached. If that is useful to you, subscribe and turn on the bell, because the 5th document has a filing deadline attached to it in most states, and people miss it by months without ever knowing there was one. Let me start with the first door, because it is the one that sounds impossible until you understand how it actually works. Somebody forging a deed and taking your house. People hear that and assume it cannot be that easy. It is exactly that easy, and the reason is a piece of how county government works that almost nobody knows. Your county recorder's office is a filing cabinet. That is genuinely what it is. Its legal function is to record documents and make them part of the public record. In the overwhelming majority of counties in this country, it is not an investigative body. It does not verify that the person on the deed is the person who signed it. It does not telephone you. It does not check anything. A document that is properly formatted and notarized gets recorded. Documents are filed first and verified never. So the sequence runs like this. Somebody searches public records for free and clear properties, which cost nothing and takes seconds. They narrow it to older owners, which is also public. They prepare a deed transferring your property to themselves or to a company. They get it notarized, sometimes legitimately with a forged signature, sometimes not legitimately at all. They walk it in, it gets recorded, and now the public record says somebody else owns your house. What happens next is the part that costs money. They do not usually try to sell it because a sale involves a title company that would look closely. They borrow against it. A hard money loan, fast, minimal verification, secured by property the record now says they own. They take the cash and they are gone, and the lien stays attached to your house. You find out later, sometimes much later, and then you are paying a lawyer to prove you own the home you have lived in for 30 years. And I want to name why this particular crime lands on this particular group, because it is not random and it is not about anybody being gullible. It is arithmetic on the criminal's side. They want a property with no lender attached, because a lender monitors its collateral and would notice. They want an owner unlikely to be checking public records regularly, because the whole scheme depends on time passing. And they want a property where nobody else is coming and going who might intercept a letter. Paid off, older owner, living quietly. That is not a description of somebody foolish. That is a description of somebody who did everything right and finished paying for their house. So if you are sitting there feeling faintly embarrassed that you had never considered any of this, put that down. There is nothing to be embarrassed about. Nobody prepares you for the idea that finishing your mortgage moves you up a target list, because it is a genuinely counterintuitive thing, and no part of the system that congratulated you on the last payment mentioned it. Maurine is a retired teacher, and she found out when a letter arrived about a loan she had never taken. She had lived in that house since the 1980s. It had been paid off for 11 years. She had never missed a property tax payment and had never had a lien of any kind on anything in her life. Somebody had recorded a deed transferring her property, and the county had accepted it, because accepting it is what the county does. By the time it was untangled, she was $4,000 into legal fees and had spent months of her life on it. And the phrase she used, which I have not been able to shake, was that she felt like she was trespassing in her own kitchen. And the entire thing would have been stopped inside 24 hours by something free that she had never heard of. That right there is why the quiet rules exists, not clever strategy. The short list of things that already exist, that already protect you, and that nobody whose job it is has ever bothered to tell you about, written large enough to read without hunting for your glasses. Sitting down with that list on an ordinary afternoon costs you nothing. Finding out about it from a lawyer after a letter arrives about a loan you never took costs $4,000 and a year of feeling like a stranger in your own house. It is at kevinexplains.shop. The link is in the description below and in the pinned comment at the top. And if you are watching this on your television right now, there is a code on the screen you can point your phone camera at. 7-day guarantee, no argument. If it does not put something in your hands you did not already have, send it back. So, document 1, the property fraud alert. Most counties in this country now run one, and it is free. You go to your county's website, search for property fraud alert, and register your name and your property. It takes about 5 minutes. There is nothing to pay and nothing to renew. From that point on, anytime anything at all is recorded against your property, a deed, a lien, a transfer, a mortgage, anything, you receive a notification. Generally within 24 hours. That is the whole thing. It does not prevent a filing. Nothing prevents a filing, because the office is a filing cabinet. What it does is make certain you know the same day rather than the same year, and same day is the entire ballgame. Same day, you telephone the recorder's office, you flag it, and it is a bad afternoon. A year later, somebody has borrowed against your equity and disappeared, and it is a lawsuit. Now sit with this for a second because it genuinely bothers me. Your county knows your name. It knows you own the house. It is the office holding the record, and it has never once written to tell you this program exists. Not when you bought it, not when the mortgage was satisfied, not when you turned 65. Never. Free, 5 minutes, and it is the highest value thing in this entire video. 3 practical notes on it because they decide whether it actually works for you. First, register every property you own, not just the one you live in. A holiday cabin, a rental, a piece of land you inherited, an empty lot. Vacant and unoccupied property is a favorite target precisely because nobody is standing on it to notice, and each one needs its own registration. Second, register every version of your name that could appear on a record. Middle initial and no middle initial. A maiden name if the property was ever titled that way. If your name is recorded slightly differently than you registered it, the alert can miss. Third, and this is the one people get wrong, use an email address you actually read. The whole value of this is speed. An alert sitting unread in an account you check twice a year is worth nothing. If you are not an email person, put a family member's address on it as well, and tell them what it is for, so a notification is not simply alarming. And if your county does not run one, and a few still do not, ask the recorder's office directly whether a neighboring county or a state program covers you, because coverage has been expanding steadily. Document 2. The homestead declaration, and this is the famous one, and this is where people go wrong. When you file a homestead declaration with your county, state law protects a specific amount of the equity in your primary residence from most unsecured creditors. A medical collection firm, a civil judgment from a lawsuit, a credit card company that won a default judgment. They cannot reach the protected portion. The amounts vary enormously by state, and it is worth knowing yours rather than guessing. Florida and Texas protect unlimited equity in a primary residence. Massachusetts protects up to $1 million for homeowners over 62. California runs from roughly $361,000 to $722,000, depending on local home prices. Ohio protects around $182,600. Nevada protects $65,000. Some states protect as little as $5,000. In a number of states, it applies automatically and you do not file anything. In others, you must file it yourself, and if you never did, you do not have it. Now here's the part that matters more than any of those numbers. The homestead declaration protects you from exactly one of the 3 doors. It does not stop a mortgage foreclosure. It does not stop a federal tax lien, and I will come back to that because it is the most important sentence in this video. and it does absolutely nothing about a forged deed, because a forgery is not a creditor collecting a debt, it is somebody claiming to be you. So the document that people have heard of, the one that sounds like a shield around the whole house, guards one lane, and a person who files it and feels finished has left the two doors that produce the worst outcomes standing open. And I want to be clear that I am not telling you it is unimportant, because a civil judgment is a genuinely common way people lose equity, and it arrives from directions nobody anticipates. A car accident where you were found at fault, a visitor injured on your property, a medical balance that went to a collection firm and then to court. Those are ordinary events in ordinary lives, and the homestead declaration is precisely the thing that stands between one of them and your equity. The error is not filing it. The error is stopping there. It is still worth filing. 30 minutes, notarized, free in most states. When somebody wealthy buys a house, their attorney files it before they leave the title company, and nobody ever calls it optional. Just do not mistake it for the whole answer. There is one more thing about it worth knowing because it catches people at the worst possible moment. The protection generally attaches to your primary residence, which means if you move or if you buy somewhere smaller, the protection does not simply travel with you. In states where filing is required, a new home means a new filing, and people who downsized years ago sometimes have a declaration sitting on a house they no longer own. And it protects equity, not the house itself. In a state with a limited amount, equity above that line is not protected. So somebody whose home has appreciated substantially over 20 years may have far more exposed today than when they filed. So the question is not only whether you filed, it is whether you filed on this house, and whether the amount your state protects still bears any relationship to what the house is now worth. Everett is 79, and he has had a trust for 9 years. He paid an attorney properly. He has the binder, it sits on a shelf in his office, and he has been comfortable about the whole subject ever since, because it was handled. What he had never done was move the house into it. The trust document existed. The deed still said his own name, which meant that for 9 years, the trust had been doing precisely nothing for the largest thing he owns, and his family would have gone through the exact court process he had paid to avoid. He is not careless. He did the hard part, spent the money, and made the appointment. He simply did not know there was a step after the signing, because the step after the signing is the one nobody mentions. And that is the sort of thing the guide is built for. The gap between having done something and having finished it. What the cost of that gap actually is, in plain figures. So a binder on a shelf is a binder that works instead of a binder that comforts. For a family like Everett's, that unfinished step is the difference between a private transfer and a court process that can run 3 to 5% of an estate. Same place, kevinexplains.shop. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment, and the code is on your screen if you are watching on the television. 7-day guarantee every time. A man who paid for protection 9 years ago and never had a single day of it. Document 3. Enhanced title insurance. And this one surprises almost everybody. When you bought your house, you received a title insurance policy at closing. You probably signed whatever was put in front of you because everybody does, and nobody explained that there were versions. A standard policy looks backward. It covers problems that existed before you bought. A forgery in the chain of ownership before your purchase. A hidden lien left by a previous owner. Defects that were already there. It does not cover what happens afterward. So if somebody forges a deed on your property next spring, a standard policy does not cover it. That event happened after your closing, and the policy you have was never written to reach it. An enhanced owner's policy faces forward. It covers forged documents recorded after closing, identity theft transfers, and fraudulent conveyances in the future, and critically, it generally covers the legal cost of fighting them, which is the part that runs into tens of thousands. This one is not free, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. But the action is a 5-minute phone call, and here is the exact question. Ring the title company that handled your closing and ask, is my policy standard or enhanced? And if it is standard, what does an upgrade cost? That is it, 2 sentences. And it is the only item in this video where knowing the answer might genuinely be enough on its own. Document 4, the Revocable Living Trust. And I want to be precise about what it does because it gets oversold constantly. When your home is titled in your own name, the public record says so, and every one of the searches I described at the start of this video begins there. When it is held in a trust, the record shows the trust name instead. You still own it, still live in it, still control it entirely, and nothing whatsoever changes about your daily life. It does two things. It keeps your home out of probate, so it transfers to your family without a court process, privately and without delay. And it removes your personal name from the most obvious search, which makes you a less convenient target for somebody scanning records for easy ones. What it does not do is protect you from creditors during your lifetime. That is the homestead declaration's lane, not this one. Different doors. Setting one up properly requires an attorney and generally runs between $1,000 and $3,000. Probate, by comparison, commonly runs 3 to 5% of the estate, which, on a $500,000 house, can be $25,000. And the thing Everett teaches us is the one to check tonight if you already have one. Pull the deed. Not the trust document, the deed. Confirm the property is actually titled in the name of the trust. A trust that does not contain your house is a very expensive folder. Two more things about the trust that people ask me constantly. The first is whether putting the house in a trust affects your property tax exemptions or your homestead protection. In most states, a properly drafted revocable living trust does not, precisely because you remain the beneficial owner and nothing about your ownership has genuinely changed. But the rules vary and the drafting matters, so that is a specific question to put to the attorney rather than an assumption to make. The second is whether you can do it yourself with a form from the internet. You can prepare documents that way. What goes wrong is the funding, which is the exact step Everett missed, and getting a deed recorded incorrectly can create a problem considerably worse than the one you were solving. This is one of the few places in this video where I would genuinely spend the money, and one thing that has nothing to do with scammers or creditors at all. If you become unable to manage your affairs, a trust generally lets whoever you named step in without a court appointing a guardian. That process is slow, public, and expensive, and avoiding it is arguably the most valuable thing a trust does for the person who set it up, rather than for their heirs. Now the third door, and this is the one I promise to come back to, the government. If you owe federal back taxes and do not resolve them, a federal tax lien attaches to everything you own, including your house. It becomes public record. It makes selling or refinancing nearly impossible without settling first. And a federal tax lien overrides state homestead protection. Completely. The protection you filed, the unlimited equity in Florida or Texas, none of it applies to this. Federal law wins. So everything else in this video sits on top of one foundation, which is being current with the tax authority. If that door is open, the other 4 documents are decoration. For retirees, this happens far more easily than people expect, and almost never through anything dishonest. A Roth conversion creates a tax bill nobody planned for. A lump sum payment pushes a year into a higher bracket. An estimated payment gets missed. A letter arrives, does not get opened because letters from that agency are frightening, and 6 months later, there is a lien. The fix is unglamorous. Open every letter. If you owe, arrange a payment plan immediately, because an installment agreement stops the escalation while you are paying. And if a lien already exists, that is a conversation with a tax professional about release or subordination, not something to sit with alone. And if you are looking at a letter right now and cannot work out what it actually is, email me. The address is on your screen and in the description below. I read every one that comes in. And there is one specific version of this that I want to flag because it catches decent people who have done nothing wrong at all. If somebody in your household has been ill and the year involved a great deal of medical expense, or a spouse died and the tax situation changed shape entirely, that is very often the year an estimated payment gets missed. Not through carelessness, because that year had other things in it. The agency does not know any of that. It sees a balance, and the sequence that follows is automatic rather than personal. So the specific instruction is this. In any year where something large happened, an illness, a death, a house sale, a large withdrawal, treat the tax question as part of the event rather than something to look at next April. A single conversation at the time with whoever prepares your return prevents almost every version of this. And if a letter has already arrived and gone unopened, open it today. The options available to somebody who responds are meaningfully better than the options available to somebody who responds late, and that gap widens the longer it sits. Document 5. Your property tax standing, and this is the one with a deadline on it. Your own county can take your house for unpaid property taxes. That is not new. What is new is what happens to the money afterward. There was a Supreme Court case a few years ago involving a woman in her 90s whose county seized her property over a tax debt, sold it, kept what she owed, and kept the surplus as well. The court ruled unanimously that keeping the surplus was unconstitutional. States are now required to return it. That is a genuine victory, and it changed the law. But states are implementing it at wildly different speeds, and more importantly, it does not change the seizure itself. It changes what happens to the leftover money afterward. The redemption window, the period in which you can pay what is owed and reclaim the property, still exists and still closes. So, 2 things to know: what your state's redemption timeline actually is, and that a delinquency notice is the beginning of a clock rather than a reminder. And then the part of this that puts money back in your pocket immediately. Nearly every state offers a property tax exemption for older homeowners, and they are substantial. In Texas, the exemption for those over 65 can remove $200,000 or more from your taxable value. Florida freezes assessments for qualifying seniors. Georgia exempts seniors over 62 from school taxes entirely. New York expanded its senior exemption to as much as 65% of assessed value. None of these are automatic. You have to apply. In many states, the deadline falls in the spring, which means if you turned 65 some years ago and nobody mentioned this, you have been overpaying your property taxes ever since, quietly, every year, and no county has ever written to tell you. So where do I come out on all 5? What strikes me is not any single document. It is the ranking. The one that costs the most and has the most impressive name is the trust. The one that would have saved Maurine is free and takes 5 minutes, and almost nobody has heard of it. The one everybody has heard of guards 1 door out of 3, and the one that overrides every state protection in the country is not a document you file at all. It is simply staying current with the tax authority. So the value runs almost exactly opposite to the cost and the reputation. That is not an accident, and it is not a conspiracy either. Expensive things have people selling them. Free things have nobody. And on the county recorder specifically, I will say this plainly. An office that records documents without verifying them, in an era where anybody can search property records from a sofa, is a system built for a slower world. That is not the fault of the people working there, but the burden of catching a forgery has landed entirely on the person who was forged against, and that person is generally the least equipped to catch it. So here is the whole thing, and it fits in one afternoon. Sign up for your county's property fraud alert. Free, 5 minutes, do it today, and it is the one I would do first. Check whether your state requires you to file a homestead declaration or grants it automatically. If it requires filing and you have not, that is 30 minutes and a notary. Ring your title company and ask whether your policy is standard or enhanced, and what an upgrade would cost. If you have a trust, pull the deed and confirm the house is actually in it. If you do not have one, that is a conversation worth having. And check 2 things with your county: that you are current on property taxes and that you have claimed every senior exemption you are entitled to, because that one pays you back every single year from now on. Maurine had every one of these available to her, free, the whole time, and nobody had ever said the words. Everett paid for protection 9 years ago and never had 1 day of it, because of a step after the signing that nobody mentions. Both of them were careful people. Both were doing exactly what a sensible person does, working from a picture in which somebody, somewhere, would eventually have told them. Nobody is going to tell you. That is the actual lesson. The county will not, the title company will not, and the assessor will not. So take the afternoon and tell yourself. I am Kevin. Thanks for watching. Do not forget to check the quiet rules at kevinexplains.shop.